Funding for Start the Beat is provided in part by our supporters on Patreon. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Start the Beat with Sykes. My name is Sykes and this is my podcast. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone who checked out the last episode. If you're one of those people, I hope you enjoyed the conversation and thanks so much for coming back. But for everyone out there who's new to the show, welcome. Feel free to make yourselves at home, and as always, there's beer and soda in the fridge. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to put a quick disclaimer out there. Nothing serious. It's just that my guest on the show today is in Norway. I am in the United States of America. We recorded this conversation via video chat using the internet, and hey, sometimes the internet doesn't work. Sometimes computers get tired. So there may be some strange audio artifacts here and there with signal, or the video might pause and freeze a little bit. That's just internet shit, connections. Not much we could do about it. Regardless, it's a great conversation. You're really going to enjoy it. So just, your phone's not fucking up if you hear anything wacky. It's just the internet and the way that we have to do things right now. I'm sure we're all used to it, but I like to put that out there because I try my best to put out the best quality product that I can, and sometimes things are just out of my control. But with that out of the way, I'm going to shut the hell up so we can get into this conversation. Sit back, relax, and let's start the motherfucking beat. How the fuck's it going, man? How you doing? Make some noise for the internet. So, for everyone out there that does not know you, please introduce yourself to the fine people of the internet in the world.
Well, my name is, I have two names when it comes to music. I have Svartalv, which is my black metal side. And I have SA Destroyer, which is my thrash metal, heavy metal side. And my name is Kenneth, that which my parents gave me. But Svartalv is also in my passport. So I guess that's a part of me. I've been into music since I started my first band in 1987 and played my first show then, and just evolved with the whole kind of thing into thrash metal, death metal, black metal, and I got started with bands like Gehenna and Satyricon, which really just, launched everything. And after that, it's easier to kind of pick and choose. So that's kind of like the very short version.
Gotcha. I think that, starting to play shows in 1987, I don't know if you really could have picked a better time to be getting into the music that you play. You've really been through pretty much the whole... It was
so inspiring, no matter where you turn or what you do, it was just good shit, no matter what it was, just... I heard the other day I was writing for a magazine about 1987, because that's the year I discovered Coroner and their RIP album, the first one, and that's one of those things that... I don't know if you can see that, but just by mentioning it,
yeah,
I get goosebumps. Because that's one of those things, you go into a shop and just, okay, you got 50 kroners, which is $5, and you just, okay, that cover looks cool. You turn it around and it's oh, Noise has released it. That's a good stamp. And you go home and it just turns your whole life around, And then you go down to the rehearsal room and you tell the other guys and you give them a cassette, and, that whole thing. It was so different, and it was so rare, because that album, you have saved up and you have been doing dishes and cleaning your room and doing all this shit to get this fucking money. I even walked from the suburbs that I lived in outside Oslo and walked into town. That was 6 hours because I could only afford a bus fare one way.
Yeah.
So I walked in, I got my fucking album, and then I could take the bus back, or I could do it the other way. But the walk home is really fucking long when you're holding that Ozzy Osbourne album and you're just walking for 6 hours watching that fucking thing.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger and taking the public transit to go pick up albums, I didn't even have a like compact, I didn't have like a Walkman or a compact disc player. So I would literally just like read all of the lyrics like over and
Yeah.
over again until I got home. And then like I would listen to it and I would like call a friend on the phone and try to play it for them over the phone. It's a much different, a much different time than now.
Very.
And,
and that's where that whole package thing comes in too, because when you're kind of expecting something when you're coming home, when you got one of those, you have Masters of Puppets or whatever kind of album from around those days, and you know what you're gonna get. You just know this is gonna be so good because the pictures, the cover, the titles, the whole feel, the whole packaging.
Yeah,
that's what it turns you on way before you put in the fucking album. You're like, wow, and that thing's not happening that much anymore. When you get that woo feeling even before you put it in.
No, because like when you're looking at album covers, the majority of the time it's on a phone screen next to a sandwich that somebody ate and in front of a post of some politic thing. Like you don't just get to like go to like the metal section of a CD store and just try to find the most gnarly looking thing. I remember
even the smell, the smell of the LPs and the people standing around listening to those weird kind of headphones where you have to hold them. You can't I don't know if you guys have.
No, I don't think we did.
States, but just so people couldn't like kind of hang out for 2 hours and listen to Pink Floyd albums. They had this, just headphones with this handle thing on the bottom. So you have to kind of hold it up and kind of squeeze them into your ears instead.
Oh, interesting.
So you're not going to stand there for 2 hours. You're just going to listen to the most important parts, and you're going to put the thing down again.
I think that it's interesting how like for a long time I felt like movies and like the movie poster artwork. I remember in the 2000s thinking to myself like movie poster art sucks now. And now I kind of have the same thought with album covers. It's like it seems like nobody cares anymore. And if you do get a new LP, it's so rare to find like a band, even like where you're getting like a super awesome gatefold jacket or something that includes like a booklet or anything like that. Like one of the first records I owned, my uncle bought for me, and it was a copy of Iron Maiden's Live After Death. And I still have the same fucking record. And I remember being a little kid and like you get lost in that artwork because it wraps around the whole thing. And it came with like this huge like 20-page booklet of them on tour and all these pictures and pictures of this stage show, and like you get lost in that just listening to that fucking thing, man. Like it changed me.
You feel a part of the whole band, when you're finished with that whole package, and that takes a couple of years before, because you're gonna stare at that cover, and you have to find the little symbol from the dude who's drawing the Maiden covers.
Yeah.
Have to read on the little tombstones, with their little names on and all this kind of stuff.
That
and that whole thing, and it just, I don't know, it becomes almost like a part of a family.
Yeah.
And I know for people who's like stuck in really bad times, it actually becomes a part of your family. It's that album is worth more to you than, your actual family is fucking with you.
Yeah.
That's where the power of the music comes in there. When you put that thing on and you hear that, Long Beach Arena, or whatever the fuck Bruce is screaming, you're just like, oh yes, I'm there.
Yeah. It was really awesome. Actually, just this past summer before COVID happened and, the end of the fucking world, we actually got to see Iron Maiden. I'd seen them a lot of times, but my girlfriend had never seen them live. And her dad, who had just passed away a couple years ago, was a huge Iron Maiden fan. So like she was like real emotional being at the show, and like she started crying as soon as they started playing, just because she was like so happy and just like overwhelmed with being there in the moment. Just it is a powerful thing. Like they still fucking have it. And that says a lot.
It is. It's really. I've been on stage and had people crying in front of me while you're on stage, and that's a really powerful thing too. And I remember this really young dude, this couple, and we played in Hamburg with Satyricon, and we played Mother North, which is then it was like one of the new big tracks, and this couple was standing there just bawling their eyes out, And then, I don't care if they're 17 years old. You're kind of striking a chord there between, you and them, and then to be able to do, the Steve Harris thing, and you just move up on them, with your bass guitar and your makeup on, and you just, okay, let's make these people have a really good time.
So
that's what happened, when I was young and went to a Maiden show, and I saw Steve Harris doing that machine gun thing with his bass, and he's like, 8 feet away from me. That shit changes my whole life. You go home with hopes and dreams and all kinds of shit. And I had the same. I made my mom get the same pants. I was beat up in school because I had the Steve Harris pants and those kinds of things.
Hell yeah, dude! I spent countless hours as a toddler in my room running around with the tennis racket pretending to be Steve Harris.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's the training, you have to do that if you're gonna ever be on a stage. If you're one of those dudes who's never been jumping around in your room, fuck it, you're never gonna make it on stage. If you go to Wacken, you have Wacken and you have 150,000 people. You have to own that fucking place, You can't go up there and just be like a little death metal band in the corner in the rehearsal room, you have to fucking own it. And that's, you need training. You need to listen to Kiss and jump around. And
yeah,
I had this whole stage thing, with my friends, where we outside the apartment building where I lived. We rigged up. We had Twisted Sister concerts, only, of course, playback stuff. And we threatened our friends to give us, nickels and dimes. And of course, older dude who was supposed to be our manager, who ran off with like the $7 we owned that we had earned, and he bought candy for himself instead. It started there, It started in 1982. It's my first motherfucker who ran away with some money from my band.
It's funny just thinking about like how you're playing heavy metal musician and already like the kid playing promoter is being sleazy.
Oh yeah, and he was a complete dick too. He had a full personality. He was like, I don't know, he was like 14 and we were like 9 or something like that, and he was a complete package. The sleazy bastard, really up there rigging it up for us. He had this little cup with the money thing in, and when it was getting like a couple hours later, so I was like, where's Tommy gone?
Yeah.
And he was like way off buying candy.
That's so fucking funny. So you've been in this world for a very long time, the majority of your life, it would appear. And one of the things that I always need to ask people and is just like, what is it for you that keeps it going? I just imagine it's so much of your DNA, you probably don't have another choice.
I don't know. I have no choice at all. I tried once, like 15 years ago. I cut my hair to my shoulders, and I tried to do like the whole package with a big house by the sea and family and all that stuff. I regretted fucking immediately. I sat down and watched some old Wasp videos, and I cried and I drank and I don't know. That fucked me up bad. So it's in me. It's been in me since I was 7 years old, and I discovered. And my first discovery was Dee Snider, and then you're fucked. When Dee Snider becomes your god and you're 7 years old, there's nothing no one can do there. And in the beginning, in the start of the 80s, everything was so boring and gray and just like, come on, people. So when Dee Snider comes along with his, pink shit hanging everywhere, it's like, oh yeah, bring it on. And from there, that initial feeling there, that's what I'm still grasping for. That's what I'm still, when I'm in studios and making albums and stuff like that, I want that thing. I want that tickle in my stomach that I had when I was a young kid. So a lot of the stuff I recorded with Nocturnal Breed, which is much more thrash and heavy metal related, that stuff especially in the early days, and that's the kind of smart thing to do. Take a bunch of friends in the studio while you're recording, let them drink, and you can just watch through the window. When these people start just going like this, well, you got something going.
Yeah.
And you can just use that as a measurement to figure out what you're doing. And we did that on 2 albums. Everyone was drugged out and completely drunk, but it's it got this instant reflex. Oh yeah, this is perfect. This is obviously not perfect because people are walking outside having a bong instead. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I still want that. Last time we recorded in 2019, we recorded a Nocturnal Breed album. I actually told this Sverre who was doing the studio work as an engineer, I actually told him to turn off the subs. And you should have watched his face, man. What, you can't do this, I know from like an intelligent, engineer standpoint, you don't turn off the subs. But I was like, no, I want to hear this. I want to mix this thing on the studio speakers that I have, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't like, we on purpose, we try to like use not the best equipment, not the most time, tinkering around with riffs, and just get the fucking feeling in. And so we recorded and made the whole album in 1 month. And that, you can kind of hear that on the whole thing. It got that, falling down a hillside over the top 80s kind of feel. And I think that's a bit important. There's too much, time being used in studios. Band go in and like spend 1 year making a death metal album. Are you fucking shit? You can't do that.
Yeah, I think somebody that has the discography that you do between all of your projects, if you were spending that much time on every project, you'd be like 3,000 years old right now.
Yeah, I can handle that.
Yeah,
I like just going in 2-3 weeks, bang, and out, and then you can listen to it afterward. Then you get to know your album actually when you're finished with it, because you don't know what you've been doing. You're just like in this vortex of creativity, and boom, it's over, and you're like, oh, okay, here I got this album. And you can sit down and actually enjoy the album, and it's a different perspective than when you've been like threading the waters for like 1 year. And before that, you maybe spent 2 years making the albums. You're into your 3rd year with these songs. I think that's way too long. You get lost. We have done that with earlier albums, and we got completely lost in it. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars just doing stupid shit. Like we mixed an album with headsets. That's the dumbest stuff you could ever do. You can't mix. Everyone was sitting in the studio, 4 guys and the engineer, everyone with a headset, and we mixed the whole album. Of course, it sounded beautiful when we took off the headset and we came home. It's like, what the fuck? This sounds like it's inside a cardboard box.
Sure. I think that there's a really interesting thing that has happened over the past couple of decades. And metal has had like a really unfortunate side effect, or they've suffered side effects of it. And it's just like the increased access to technology and production and all of these cool fancy plugins and all of this stuff that you can do. And I mean, sure, that stuff is great, but maybe not for every genre of music. Like it seems like so many modern metal albums are being produced like a pop album, and that's fine. Like pop music should be perfect and analyzed and picked with a fine-tooth comb. That's kind of the point of it. But for like metal or punk, it's like, why does the double bass need to be quantized? Why does everything have to be perfect? Like this is, and I've said this before when talking with people about this, but it's like, I don't want my metal music to sound like electronic music. I mean, it's cool if you blend it. Like I like when like you have like industrial elements in metal and people do cool stuff, but I still like that rawness. Like I don't need it to all be perfect. And now everything sounds so sterile and everything looks the same. And it's kind of like not too dissimilar. The way I feel now is probably similar to how you felt as a kid pre-D Snyder. Like I'm just waiting for that next big thing to happen with metal. And like, I don't know what it is.
No, I think that you're completely right there. I'll try as good as I can, but it's really hard. But I try to tell everyone that you need to back away from all the plugins and all the goddamn equipment. I can guarantee you, if you took Slayer today and you gave them to me, and I take them out here in the woods where I live, and we spend 4 weeks in a crap studio with crap equipment and some beers and just some good old time, that album would be cooler than anything they've done since Season in the Abyss. I guarantee you. Because that shit has got completely lost. Listen to Metallica, it's too much. It's too much money. It's too much equipment. My guitar is like a $70,000. Who the fuck cares? Get your old crappy, Gibson V guitar with some, riff raff stuff on it. It sounds better. It just sounds better. For most things, I understand that some bands, like for example, like Dimmu Borgir and stuff, or Behemoth, or those kinds of bands, they want to use, real equipment, like to get that big ass productions going and stuff like that. But I really like that kind of Isengard approach, Dark Throne approach, where you have one microphone hanging, and that's your drum track. Done with it, and you record those drums in 2 days, and fuck it.
Yeah.
And I understand that Meshuggah can't do that because Meshuggah is like, I don't know, it's like 10 Japanese kids playing at the same time.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, I think that's a problem with a lot of the black metal bands. I'm not going to mention a bunch of names because these are friends and stuff like that. But I think a lot of the black metal bands that are really big, they need to go a couple of tracks back and stop thinking about how, I don't know, how jazzy is all this shit going to be. I'm tired of the jazz shit. It's been going on for 25 years.
Sure.
I really want some. If like black metal, I want black metal to smell of snow and woods and fucking Satan. I want death metal to like stink up like a gory fucking whore. I want it to be real again. It's all like I'm seeing everything through glass. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just me because I live far the fuck out in the woods and I don't really hang a lot out with the scene or anything, but I observe a lot. I get every day like 10 people sending me their album. Check out my album. And there is a lot of cool stuff too, but I think the big problem is, I heard Ishan talked about this here the other day on a podcast on Banger TV, that again, we're back to that package thing. You need to think about your concept. Who are we? What kind of band are we? You need to figure that shit out first, because there's a lot of band where you have one goth guy, 2 death metal guys, and one dude who suddenly want to use like full out corpse paint and stuff, and then you have a goth girl singing with some cyber shit on. It's like, what kind of band are you?
Yeah.
Even there you have to start there. Then you have to figure out, what concept are we going to do here? If you're going to do a black metal concept, which has a really high grade of, the way people look at shit, then you're going to do black metal. Think it through. It's so many bands. So I got to do a little there, and you can hear on the albums. It's like, here's a Dark Throne song, and here's a Emperor song, and here's the Dissection song, and it's like, come on, the reason why some of these old albums sound really cool, and that goes for all kind of metal albums, is that the band was into one package. It didn't necessarily just start with like, oh, we're gonna have something about this is about nuclear war, and we're gonna have medieval shit, and you can't mix that stuff up. I feel, I like full on albums. The full concept is gonna be medieval. Let it be medieval, like Skyclad or Sabbath from the UK. It's like, do it properly. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And a lot of those new bands is like it's just a scattering of all kinds of. I know they're inspired, but figure out what you're inspired by and what your package is going to be.
I think that it's really hard to focus and take the time to figure out those things now for some people because of the internet. Everybody feels like they're in a rush. There's no longer this like, oh, we can get lost in the practice space for months. Everybody feels like, oh, we need to be ready to go because we can play this show and we want to go on tour. Everybody wants to do everything before actually writing the fucking songs. Like, nobody wants to take the time to do that. Everybody wants to be on the stage.
Yeah, you see a lot of those people who's like, well, we made this song 5 minutes ago, and boom, there's a little snippet of it on Facebook, and you're like, what? I don't really get that stuff, because when at least the first albums I started making, we spent a lot of time, figuring out the feeling and where we were going and all that kind of stuff before. And when we released the album, because this was before the internet, we had no idea what was going to happen. The old black metal albums, we released them for ourselves, just for ourselves, for the feeling we wanted to create. And especially with Gehenna, we really, really just wanted to make dark music for ourselves. We didn't even want to call it black metal, because it was like, not really. If you look at Gehenna, it's one of those black metal bands who doesn't really go all Gargaroth out with the spikes and inverted crosses, because it was like, hey, we're going to make this dark medieval kind of music. And the feeling we had from making that stuff, it wasn't like, oh, we met 2 times a week and recorded an album. We met every day of the week, after school or work. We just met. We had this big woods. We just hung out in the woods, having big bonfires. We were eating there, drinking there, going down, having some rehearsals, going up again, using soot from the fireplace as makeup because none of us could afford any makeup, whatever. So we just used that instead. But when you do that for a couple of years, you get so well to know your guys. It's like almost an army thing. And then when you're on stage later and you're all full of makeup and you have these songs that you've been playing for 2 years while you've been drinking blood in the woods, it may sound silly, man, but you feel completely possessed when you're on stage when you're doing that shit. You know, it's just like it boils through you, and that stuff is gone. And I understand because you can't have a bunch of 40, 50-year-olds running around in the forest doing that shit now because that's just going to look all pedophile and weird. But, you know, I think the young guys, you know, get the fuck out of your room, get away from the internet and throw your phone away for 5 minutes and just hang out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I grew up in the suburbs, you know, we used to hang out at the gas station or wherever, you know, where the train came in and stuff. Like we were just hanging out, listening to music, talking to music, or talking about music. And like I grew up like right next to where Mayhem and Darkthrone were doing their shit. And I worked at a gas station together with Sephiris, the guitarist from Darkthrone. And I was like 3-4 years younger. So hanging out with those guys, the few times they like bothered to talk to us was really cool, you know. And I remember coming to them with like, Altars of Madness, you know. And I got the back patch from Altars of Madness. And Ivar Sephiris, he was looking at me and he was like going full on into the black metal thing. Then he was like, nah, that ain't good enough. It's not evil enough. And I was like, no, fuck. I was so disappointed. I was like, yes, now I'm on their level now. I was like, nope, you're not. Here's this thing. And then he explained, you know, the whole thing with Mayhem and blah, 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 and all kinds of bands and stuff. And that is really inspiring, though.
Yeah.
A little silly.
I know that there's been like, you know, obviously you're very aware of how like romanticized black metal culture has become over the past couple decades. And like, you know, like it's really interesting because like, you know, when I was, you know, first finding out about bands like Darkthrone and Emperor and Satyricon, like all that stuff, I was maybe like 13, 14. There's a really cool record store here where I live that carried all that stuff. So I was able to like, you know, it would basically just be like what new CD came in, what's on like Nuclear Blast or some other label that I recognize, and let me get that. You know, that's just how I had to buy music. So, you know, but I was so disconnected from all of the like culture of black metal and all of that stuff. And I didn't really start to hear about any of that stuff until years later in the internet. And you start hearing about things and seeing documentaries and all that stuff. What was it like growing up in that and then realizing that like, you know, people look at like black metal culture in Norway with this like real like romantic, magical sort of thing?
It's really weird. To tell you like this, we had, or I say we, as if I am Mayhem and Darkthrone. I'm not. I'm like a couple of years behind there, but still, I was like from that bunch with the Ulver and Emperor and all that stuff, and none of us had any idea. And if we had an idea, we probably wouldn't have done it because this wasn't what we were thinking about this growing into, you know. And for me, what's like dark romantic with this whole thing was when this was a small community of a couple of thousand people worldwide, you know, and you did it for them, you did it for yourself. That was where the magic was. Yeah. And when even like we went on tour with Satyricon in '96, even around then it was weird to see how the whole thing was like gearing up and Nuclear Blast was coming in from the side and Peaceville was finally recognizing that, oh, fuck, we got Darkthrone, man. Because Peaceville it took a little time before they understood what they had there, you know. Yeah. With Darkthrone going from Soulside Journey to the Blaze in the Northern Sky, it's like, what the fuck did we just use 10,000 pounds on, you know? Yeah, I think it paid back, but it's really weird now. I'm like just kind of like small piece in the whole thing, so I'm running my whole thing, so I have to use Facebook and all these disgusting things, and just looking at people. And I don't really post a lot and talk a lot, but I observe a lot, and it's really weird, you know, with all the 10 million Elizabeth Bathory booby girls, and
Yeah. Yeah.
holy shit, where did it come from? It's like a giant social experiment, actually,
Uh-huh.
looking at this whole thing, because nothing as radical as this has ever happened since heavy metal started, you know.
Yeah.
And if you combine the 70s and the 80s of heavy metal, I don't know if that had just as radical twist as this does, because the last 20 years it's extreme music. If you take everything from Slipknot to black metal and everything in between, it's gigantic.
Yeah.
It's enormous, and of course the mainstream music industry just ignores it completely and just jerks off Rihanna and stuff like that. But it's enormous, and it never gets recognized, and
Mhm.
it's kind of nice that it doesn't get
Yeah.
recognized.
Yeah.
Then we're still doing something right.
I think that it's interesting, again, being, like that, 13, 14-year-old kid. I think that like my whole, I remember exposure to finding out about something was in like a major music publication, and they had a small write up about Cradle of Filth, and they called them
Yeah.
the worst band ever. And it made me want to listen to it. And I heard
Of
it, and I
course.
had never heard anything like that, and it just like opened up the floodgates for me. I was
Yep.
like, holy shit. And like why, like, and I tried to show my friends this stuff, and it was just like way too much. Like I went from like
Yeah.
0 to 60, because like I had some friends that were like, it kind of went from like that Slipknot and things like that were kind of starting to happen at that time, Korn, bands like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yo, check out Dimmu Borgir. And everybody's like, what the fuck is this? So I kind of fell out of like, I mean, I didn't lose friends or anything, but it was like hard to find people to connect with about like showing this stuff too. But it is huge, even if like it is like a Cradle of Filth or a Slipknot or whatever. Like these are all very, very large bands that it's interesting how under the surface they still operate. It's probably not too dissimilar from like horror movies, and horror movies being some of the hugest money making things in the world, but they still kind of get shafted a lot when it comes to, critical acclaim. But also we don't necessarily want that acclaim. I kind of want people to leave me alone. I like having my own little
Yeah.
bubble.
Yeah, that's when it's weird, when when the Inferno festival is in Oslo, and we go into town and you have blackpackers. You have actual people who's bought like this blackpacker tour thing with a tour bus and going to the church burning places and everything. Is like, it's really weird and commercialized, and not to offend you, but a little Americanized.
Sure, no,
We
totally.
start like bringing in backpackers to do that. I liked when it was weird, when people just went, "What the fuck are you?" It's like, yes, beautiful. Now my mom knows what everything is.
Sure. There's like, it's weird when, I imagine maybe you have conversations with some people that, may be super into the culture, and that's cool. Hobbies are cool. Having interests is great,
Yeah.
but there's probably people that, live closer to me that are, Americans that know 10 times more about what's going on around you than even You're like, how the fuck do you know all this stuff?
It's really weird. It's like a little, I don't know, soap opera thing that kind of moves around all the time. And since I
Yeah.
know like both sides, I both talk a lot to the fans and I know a lot of the people from the business. It's kind of weird how like rumors, erupt, and he's been doing this and you've been doing that, and didn't you kill this and murder that? And it's like, no, it's way out of context.
Sure.
Of course there was some bad shit, but. And a lot of people expect that we still do that. And I had people who got really pissed off and came into the tour bus. We were doing a tour with Balsago and Emperor. And we had some guys from Italy coming in there. And they were like devastated because we weren't doing black rites. And, we weren't doing the whole Satan affair,
Yeah.
It was like, no, not really. We've been on tour now for 2 weeks, man. We just
We're
watching Mr. Bean,
Yeah. I think that is always like an interesting thing. And I had realized it pretty young, actually, because I started going to a lot of shows. There was a venue not too far from my house where I ended up getting to see like Cradle of Filth and getting to see bands like Nevermore. And I saw Dimmu Borgir there. I saw, I could keep like a lot of really cool bands were coming through at the time. And I got to see a lot of these bands, but being around like the people at the merch tables, cause I would always be like that nerdy little kid that wants to talk to whoever's from the band and like ask them what they're listening to. And it was always very common. Like, oh, I didn't hear that new metal album. We're listening to like this, or we're just watching movies. Like it really normalized everybody. And I like realized it really young that like, even though they're this thing on stage, it's, it's a show and like they are those people, but also like, hey, I don't like listening to extreme music 24/7 and doing crazy things. I also like to watch Mr. Bean and just play video games and eat potato chips and hang out. Like we're all human.
Yeah, of course. People forget that thing completely, And I think it's important what you said there. The kid that's hanging out, an hour after the show around like the merch stand just to talk to someone or get a signed album and stuff. That's where like metal differs from a lot of other kind of music, because if you go to a pop show and when Britney Spears is finished, everyone just walks off home and don't give a fuck, At the metal shows, if you hang out, and a lot of people like to hang out, suddenly Bruce Dickinson is coming out, and just having a beer and having a talk. I met Dio like that, and a lot of people, just hanging out at places, and that gives you that community feeling. And especially when you're very young and you do that stuff, it becomes like almost father figure kind of things, and some dude from Iron Maiden or some Megadeth or something stopped and actually talked to you like a person, hey dude, those you can live forever, on a little hey dude from Dave Mustaine. When he looks at you with his kind of down hair and going like, hey dude, with his rat eyes, you're like just melting inside and just like, oh dude. Those kind of things. And I try to remember that when I go out and play, and I keep forgetting that I'm getting older, so I keep meeting people who grew up on my music, and that's kind of weird. So I try to, remember, and not to kind of like, again, not to mention names and stuff, but I have a lot of friends who don't give a fuck, I think that's kind of like, you give them like, hey, here's some interviews from some like small magazines and stuff, and they kind of just, fuck that, and they throw it away. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. I think that's really, just annoying. And there's this guy who's been waiting for 2 hours. He's got a bag full of albums. You want to go and sign them? No, tell him to fuck off. Fuck, man. Your younger self is puking inside. When you're doing that.
It's strange. I wonder sometimes. Like I've definitely met some musicians and played, shared backstage areas with bands where it's like, do you enjoy this? Like, why? Like, what is, I mean, I understand everybody has bad days. I've had bad days on tour. I'm sure you have. It happens. You get exhausted. Sometimes you just want to be left the fuck alone. Again, we're only human. But like, there's like a difference between like being able to tell when somebody just wants to be left alone and just like an overall aura, like this energy of like, I couldn't care less.
Yeah, you have this oozing feeling that comes, and I noticed a lot of that when I in Oslo. I had like for 10 years I worked at like the biggest venue in Norway, which has about 10,000 people indoors. But the funny thing was that we had like Britney Spears one day, then we had Willie Nelson another day, then we had Iron Maiden. So you just like in a week you're going through like at least like 4 or 5 really really famous people, and then you notice this aura, Like Elton John, who worked for Elton John 3 times. He had the worst fucking aura ever.
Really?
It's like, what are you doing this for? I know there's money in this. There's a lot of money, but dude, you can't go around just being like this cactus. It's horrible. Mm-hmm. And then you meet a dude like Willie Nelson, and he was really cool, and he had joints, and everyone was smoking and talking. Willie Nelson had his aunt with him. His aunt. Willie Nelson is 5,900 years old. And then he has his aunt with him.
Yeah.
And she was playing pump organ on 2 songs. Mm-hmm. And you had like the whole the back line and everything here, and the band was out there playing to the audience. And on the backside here, they had this big ass, gaffer taped old pump organ that this 90-year-old woman was playing on. And when she didn't play, she was sitting in the green room smoking joints that Bob Marley would be envious of.
I wonder
That
I wonder if there's like a thing maybe. I find that, you mentioned earlier playing a set and like seeing like a young couple crying, right?
Yeah.
And being able to see the audience. I think sometimes maybe it's a thing where some artists, maybe they start playing a place that's so big, where they can't even see the audience because you're like, crazy lights, or you're not facing the crowd, or you're whatever. Like you get lost in this world where you actually become disconnected from the people, like in the moment. And like you just you kind of forget what it's like to have that. And that happens for a certain amount of time. And people.
I heard Billy Joel was talking about that here the other day, because Billy Joel is not playing at all. He's just not playing, hasn't done it for years. And he said that he was just the distance between him and the audience, playing in like these big ass arenas. He was missing like the real Piano Man thing, playing in front of 200 people, when it stinks of beer and whiskey in a little like damp little place, Then I can understand that. And like I mentioned earlier, Elton John acted like an asshole. Well, he's been playing arenas since 1973 or something. He doesn't have any connection at all.
Yeah.
So, and that happens probably but Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and those bands, and of course, Slayer and stuff, they're good at, communicating with their audience when you're on stage, because you can be at a big festival and you can have a pit that is like 50 feet wide, but still you can make people feel that you're almost like right next to them. And some of these guys are really good at doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that, bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, I think that they're very well aware that the reason why they got where they were was because of community and because of like tape trading and all of that cool old school shit, right? Elton John didn't get big from tape trading or some like underground community, It was all like, radio darling from the start, pretty much. I mean, I don't know his biography or anything, but like, I imagine it was a much different thing from the jump.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's like, we keep forgetting this, but like the new Wobbum scene and that whole thing there, like they got their whole tape trading kind of antics. They got that from the punk scene, and we need to thank the punk scene for that, because they taught everyone to do it yourself way, record yourself, don't give a shit if it's bad sound, tape trade, magazines, fix your outfits on stage, all that stuff that comes from punk. And because Black Sabbath wasn't doing tape trading either, man.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's I don't know, it's manager tape tradings, and so you have some of those 70s things when you have a dude who's like, I have 6 bands in my stable, and here are they demo tapes, that kind of thing. But the real like nitty gritty stuff that comes from the punk. And then New Wobbum, was just the same thing. It's worker boys from shitty town, just like can't afford anything, but here's a tape, and you can listen to Samson and Iron Maiden on this tape, and that just blew people's mind, and that just got adapted again into, I don't know, a little bit into the glam metal, but glam metal was more kind of flyer based, if you know what I mean. Like,
oh sure,
a bunch of hairy dudes running around LA just like, we have 9,000 poison things going like that. Yeah. But thrash metal again picked up that tape trading, underground magazine thing, and then it evolved to the death metal. I think that's beautiful. That's like kind of dirty thing that keeps scrolling there. I still do them. I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. I do like underground magazines. I did one for Peru here the other day. Stuff like that. I think it's cool. It's weird ass questions, and maybe we have like 200 people reading it. I don't care.
Yeah.
At least that's communicating,
I think that it's really easy sometimes to get disconnected from the impact that you're making, especially with the way that the internet is. And if you feel like, oh, I posted something and it didn't get hundreds of likes, nobody cares. It's like the fact that you even said anything and 100 people gave a shit about it is remarkable.
Yep. Yeah,
Like,
it is.
don't take what you have for granted. You know, like sometimes like I'll upload an episode of this podcast and like, you know, it has a few hundred hits and I'm like, oh, that's not a lot compared to maybe this very popular podcast. It gets tens of thousands, but still the fact that 500 people give a fuck what I want to say about anything's fantastic.
Then you have a little community going there, you know, there is a little thing going.
And it kind of,
I think that's more, it's more charming. It's much more honest and heartfelt and real. People are talking about real all the time. You know, that's real, you know, when you're kind of in those little communities and stuff, little fan clubs with 400 people. So that's cool. Mm-hmm. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I've always, you know, sometimes you like the dreams that I had, like when I was a kid in my room with a tennis racket, pretending to be Steve Harris, right? Like what that has evolved into, sometimes when I really think about it, is more of a nightmare. Thinking about like being in that position. I mean, it would be great for, the hour and a half, 2 hours that you're on stage, but everything else that goes with it, I don't know if I personally could even handle that sort of a lifestyle. Maybe it's just because like I've kind of got set in my ways now over the course of my 3 decades of life. You know, it might be a little bit more harder for me to adapt into something now versus like me being like 18 and getting started and you're all over the fucking place. Go for it, you know? But I don't know.
I think you would be engulfed by it like anyone else.
Yeah.
Most of us don't deal with it really well. That's why 95% of everyone I know in this scene, either if you're a roadie or if you're, a dude in a band, you got some kind of mental problems and drug problems or drinking problems or some kind of fucked up problem with people around you and yourself, because it's hard to deal with that whole thing. And you have all these feelings, and creative people have a lot of feelings. That's a little part of being creative. So you're being constantly like eaten by the vampires of this planet. That's what I feel when I go on tour. I don't mind the fans. I don't mind playing live. I think that's awesome. But I hate that whole vampiric feeling of like getting everything fixed, all the money things, the traveling, the meeting the fucked up people of this planet you don't really just want to be next to on the plane. And, all that stuff just drains me. And I had to take a little stand some years ago, around 2005. And I've taken almost 15 years pause from the whole live thing, where I only play like festivals and some selected gigs here and there, because if you put me on a tour bus for 6 weeks, I'm gonna just drink morphine from a bottle, man.
Yeah, in terms of just that lifestyle, that's the thing that really, really has bothered me as I've just gotten a little bit older and I've kind of gotten my shit together. Not that it's completely together, but I appreciate my time and my space away from things, and I appreciate just like not being around a bunch of fuck ups anymore. It's a lot different. Like when I was, in my 20s, it was fucking awesome. It was the shit. But now, like, I'm just like not into it, and it's kind of like exhausting at times being around people that like still think this is a party and still think tour is vacation and all that shit. Like it's exhausting.
Yeah, I'm steering completely away from that too. I mean, it destroys me, and I don't really understand why people do it for that long either, because it normally just fucks you up and you play worse and everything gets worse and tours gets worse. Normally when you go on tour, half the tour just want to chill and half the tour just want to party, and that's a big problem sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something about the whole thing. It's always going to be like this in the music scene, in that whole thing. But a lot of fans don't really think about it and get pissed because it's like, why don't you go on tour? Why don't you do this and that? And it's like, nah, but it's not personal. It's just really hard to get through those things. People think it's a vacation, but it's really not at all.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool to see a lot of places and things and stuff like that, but yeah, it's people, it's always people. It comes down to people. No matter what it is, it always comes down to people. And
yeah, I think that maybe sometimes, like, kind of going back to thinking of like why some people maybe don't give a shit about fans and whatnot. I think I've definitely known people that are just in bands for everything but the band. Like they're on stage and they play and it's like they're clocked in. Like they're doing,
Yeah.
they'll play their set, but whatever. It's all about, the booze, the girls, seeing places, whatever. I don't give a shit about the band. And that can really leak out into being really toxic. And it sucks whenever you look up to a band or you're you have a friend in a band and you realize that that's what's going on. You're like, oh man, thought you were one of us. You're not.
Yeah,
that's something different.
It destroys a band. I played with people like that several times, and it destroys a band like a cancer from the inside when they have that thing. And they start, even they're playing, you need to play with someone who is inspired, and not inspired because you want to go fuck some 19-year-old chick on the side or do your drugs or whatever. You have to, music has to be the one and first thing.
Yeah.
And if it's not that, it's no point anymore. And you have all these bands which will go around like clockwork, and you can see some of the tours, like these packaging tours, where the same bands play together with each other for years and years and years. It's really weird, why is Lamb of God playing together with Slayer for 6 years in a row?
Yeah,
I think it's really weird, and it's the same show and it's the same thing. And I know Creator does the same thing, and no offense to Miller because he's made some fucking awesome music, but what I've seen from what they're doing now is just like this machine-like thing. He's saying the same thing between the same songs at different places. It's just a routine, saying and doing. It's like, what's the point then?
Yeah,
it must. Even Lemmy loved doing this. Lemmy did different shit on every. He didn't really do much, but he said different shit. He adapted the show for those fans at that place.
Mm-hmm.
That's I don't know, but it's money, of course, too. For a lot of these people, I think that's what destroyed Slayer too. From what I've heard, is that it was just about the money at the end there. It's just like, everyone is traveling in their own bus, and as I said earlier, back to people should go back to those early days when everything was a little more shitty. Because it just makes better brotherhood and everything, when you kind of have to struggle a little. I think metal is about struggling a little too,
Yeah. Maybe listen up, bands. Maybe if you didn't have to go and buy, $25,000 worth of fucking Kempers and all this amp profiler bullshit to take on the road, you wouldn't be sweating making so much money when you play shows to fucking 40 people all the damn time. Play within your means. I think that it's so weird, and just you made the joke earlier about people having a real expensive guitar and things like that. And it's I see that shit too. It's not necessary.
Nope.
What fucking version of Pro Tools was Rust in Peace recorded on? It wasn't. You don't fucking need any of that stuff, and that's the best goddamn sounding album, one of the best I've ever fucking heard in my life. That's the peak of production, because that album is overproduced, but it's still sweet.
But it's
tight. It's tight. It's real tight.
US thrash dream kind of just taken to that perfect kind of point.
Uh-huh.
I love that album. I love the sound. I love everything on it, but it's organic. This is microphones that has been put up in front of the drums.
Uh-huh.
There's no trigger shit going on. When they mixed it, you do it like in the old days. You're sitting 3-4 guys in front of the mixer with 24 tracks. This guy is doing those 5 ones. This guy is doing this, and you can go really old school. We did some albums like that, and it's really fun. Everyone's got their little thing. Oh, you have to remember, the reverb is coming in on the solo, and you're doing it completely organic, and that makes every song a little different. It's not like now where there's the exact same mix on every track, because you just record the tracks after one, and you just have you know what I mean. It's just. It takes away that organic feeling,
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen to old Iron Maiden albums or whatever old metal album, it kind of moves, It's like a little ocean. It's not the same sound on every track.
Yeah, I think that there's, I don't know. I think there's just something that happened, and I guess we could probably blame, new metal in America in general, which, usually we're to blame for pretty much everything. But, where that whole Ross Robinson Roadrunner Records sort of boom happened, and everything got your Fear Factories and shit like that, really pushed production, and those bands got pretty big. They got, a lot bigger than other metal bands. So people were like, oh, this is what metal is supposed to sound like. Metal is supposed to sound like a Slipknot, which, I mean, Ross Robinson did a fairly okay job at trying to keep things raw, but everything's still like compressed to all hell. So you're like getting that, loudness war sort of thing going on. And now everything has to be loud. Everything has to be tight. Everything has to be this and that. It's not like you can't have your own. I feel like bands are afraid to have their own like sound and their own voice because they're more concerned with like getting on some Spotify playlist. And if it doesn't fit the playlist's feel, then they're not gonna get listeners, because that's what it's all about now. It's no longer about like, hoping that someone from a label is going to see your band in some smoky bar. It's about like hoping that you have this package that's presentable enough that some like, idiot in Brooklyn that has a Spotify playlist with 1 million listeners will put it on, their fucking thing. I don't know.
And they
sucks.
A little bit of the problem too is that people go and they pay for this, famous studios with famous producers. And those dudes and those studios have one specific sound. And they love to use that same fucking equipment on every band in the same way. Yeah. And you can hear that on some, even some labels, you can hear that.
Oh, sure.
The sound is the same. There's been some years especially with Nuclear Blast, when it was like, is everything just being grinded to the same grinder? It's
sure.
Same exact sound. And I hear this now, even, like the latest Possessed album. The songs are great, and I'm sure they're like gunning for it completely, but the whole production it's so mastered, flat and dead, and without any hills and bottoms and tops and peaks. It's horrible. After 3-4 songs, I have to turn this shit off. It's eating my brain instead of enjoying it.
Yeah.
And that's not because of Possessed. That's because of the studio and the production team and everyone who's whispering them in the ears. Oh, you should do this, you do that. Use this Jackson guitar it costs like $10,000. Use this amp. Is blah, 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 blah. And in here you can have like this plug-in. You get the same sound as Exodus used for 7 albums during the millennia, after the millennia, and stuff like that. It's a cool sound, but everyone can't use it. It's like when Pantera came and everyone was doing it's like, everyone can't do the same shit.
They changed a lot. And when I'm like thinking, the metal band that I'm playing in now, we have like, a pretty heavy like Dark Tranquility, At the Gates sort of influence thing. But like, bands like that, like At the Gates has only released several albums, but there are like 10,000 albums that sound like At the Gates as a result of the production team and all of that stuff. And it's like, I try so hard to be like, okay, like I love this stuff and I love that we're doing this, but like we need to try really, really hard to do our own thing here, because like I don't need to make a shitty version of an album that I love. Like that's like rude. Why would I want to
invent it yourself? You have to reinvent it some way. You have to reinvent it, no matter what band you're like inspired by. But it's true, like after Slaughter of the Soul and the big At the Gates thing, it was horrible. You had a ton of bands actually at the same time doing the Pantera thing, Machine Head thing, and At the Gates thing. And it's so bad. What's the point of trying to be the new Pantera? There's no point at all. First you need to find a new Phil. You can't ever find a new Phil ever. You can't find that dude. Fucking if you search in hell for him. And then you got the brothers, and you can't like recreate that. And I had so many friends who were going like down this plank of Pantera kind of sounding stuff, and just like, and they're gone from the whole music scene because they so wished to be like that, and their dreams was just like completely crushed because at least here in Europe, black metal came and ate everything up instead.
The thing that I think people don't realize sometimes is like, sure, like if you take like a band like Pantera, they were composition wise simple songs, but like all those motherfuckers grew up in studios and they had like this like, you know, lifelong connection with each other and playing together. And you get that sort of thing like Metallica has it too, where like there's that like that off sort of groove where they can kind of get behind the beat, but they're always locked in. And like you don't get that just by like forcing yourself to have it. Like, you know, you got to grow up with some motherfuckers and create this thing. That's the only way you get that sound.
That's why all the debut albums sound so fucking good, because they're normally recorded with your friends from the last 5 years, from school, you know, stuff like that. And you're all kind of like putting down all the dreams you had since you were born till that point. And then comes that second album, and that's like going with a shotgun. Just that's where like 70% of all the bands just fuck off. Because they forget that kind of stuff, you know, that brotherhood kind of thing that, I don't know, it's really important for playing in a band. And, you know, I love Pantera. I think Pantera is really good. When it came, I was very skeptical, and it took some years before I kind of took it in. But the musicianship, the will to kind of execute that they have, very few bands have that.
Yeah. And like
very, very few bands have that. If you meet those, or if you saw some of their shows when after they kind of turned that Cowboy from Hell switch, you know, it's like, dude, you're going to be God-born if you're going to do that stuff, you know, better.
I saw them, I believe I saw them, they either opened for Ozzy or Black Sabbath here. And it was a huge show. And it's just like looking back on it now, with all this hindsight, thinking about, you know, nobody else was doing anything like that at the time, which isn't remarkable.
They created that whole thing. They are the reason for new metal, for machine type metal. You know, they are the reason for all of that.
It blew up. Huge. Like I said, I saw them with either Ozzy or Black Sabbath. I can't remember which one, but either one is a fantastic person to be, you know, playing a stadium tour with, especially if you're just like, you know, some young fucking assholes from Texas just doing this wild new shit. Like, but people fucking loved it.
Yeah.
So wild.
All the bands that came out of that, like Crowbar, and, you know, everyone wanted, you know, to do that properly. You know, they thought everyone was like, oh, yeah, you think you can riff? Listen to this shit. You know, then you say, okay, well, there was a billion guitarists, you know, when Pantera came out with Cowboys from Hell, that just like put down the axe and just, okay, I'm fucking out of here.
Yeah. So I mean, like, you know, it's like you have either like, that was probably, I think like what Cowboys from Hell, that would have been like 90 or 91. Somewhere around there. That's like probably around the same time. So my dad was and still is like a metalhead, and I found out about so much stuff through my dad. So it would always be like, you know, Maiden or Metallica, but I also remember that era being real weird because I had shit like Pantera that I was hearing, which I never heard anything like that. And then on the flip, I was hearing stuff like Dream Theater, which is like the polar fucking opposite. It's like none of this is Iron Maiden. We've gone in like two different extremes, but it was really cool looking back on it and seeing all of this stuff start to bubble. But like in the time, you know, my little kid brain was like, whoa, like just
it was like that in all the different genres and stuff. I think around 1990, 1991, that's where everything branches off. That's where grunge music came in from the side and butt fucked everyone. And that's where black metal really reacted and started going. That's where death metal was at its peak, you know, around between 90 or like say 89, 91. And thrash metal was dying, heavy metal was dying, new metal was coming up. It's like this giant, you know, crossroads for heavy metal around those days. And you can see it if you watch. I don't have linear TV, so I don't watch TV apart from the news. So I just use YouTube, and I collect the whole kind of stuff. So I have like still Headbangers Ball going on TV. And I was watching here the other day, like Monsters of Rock concerts from the UK. And how it really changes, because I was watching the show from 1990, and then comes 92 with Pantera and Skid Row dying. And by the time it's 1995, you can see how everything has changed, like monumentally changed.
Yeah.
And Iron Maiden looks unsure of themselves, and it's really
Oh,
weird, the whole thing, and in 1991, everyone was like, woohoo, and Blackie
yeah.
Lawless was like tip-tapping around on stage, and the year after, it's like Pantera, and it's like, there it went.
Uh-huh. It's really, really fun talking with people that aren't aware of that like mid to late 90s era Iron Maiden and what happened. And because I do have some friends that are like, most people that I know are just know like, those core Bruce albums. Like I've like known people like a friend of mine, Kelly, we were hanging out and she had talked about how like she's like, I don't like Iron Maiden and I always get like shit on for it. I just don't like them. And I'm always like, did you ever hear their first two albums? And she was like, I have no idea that there was stuff without Bruce. And I was like, you would probably like those albums just knowing the kind of stuff that you like personally. And lo and behold, she loved them. She had no idea. She just doesn't like the like metal opera sort of thing. She liked the more like gritty stuff that they were doing back then.
Imagine that poor dude or dudette who's like the first album is the one with what's his fucking name, the Wolfsbane dude, the X Factor album.
Oh,
imagine that being your first impression of Iron Maiden. You get X Factor and you just want to go kill yourself. And you never want to listen to it ever again. And you wouldn't understand the whole planet because the whole planet loves Iron Maiden. And you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. On that tour. Iron Maiden played here on that tour in a venue that's like a very, very small venue, like, not like, maybe a couple thousand cap venue. And
they played for 2,500 in Oslo and it was horrible. It was like, oh man, you shouldn't have done this. This is painful.
Like telling people about like, like if you want to talk about like, the dark ages of metal, Iron Maiden played at the Metropole and people were like, what? When? like 1997 or 8 or something. I don't remember what year it was. And they're like, fuck. And I'm like, yeah, because everybody was, what other bands played there at that time? Probably like bands like Incubus or Deftones or Korn or System of a Down, like all that shit. And they were packing the place,
Yeah, they were coming up,
Yeah. It's funny, just like that crossroads where like, fuck. So
but those times were horrible, when you have that shit. You have like people like Tommy Lee suddenly thinking, I'm gonna make some hip hop album. Tommy, no one wanted it ever. I don't think he even wanted it himself. He was just so confused, and Kid Rock was fucking his ex-wife, and he's like, I have to make some hip hop, man. It's like, oh fuck, what's going on? And you like, for me here in Europe, I'm buying Metal Hammer and Kerrang magazines, and I'm hoping to see a trace of some kind of life, and it isn't. There's nothing. It's everything was just like dying for some years there, and that's when it was really nice to come from the extreme metal scene, because at least I can look into dark cupboards and there was some black metal there, or some kind of weird dude making some foggy music alone in a room. I take that any day compared to that horrible stuff, or Megadeth and watching what they were doing. And I don't know. I think maybe Judas Priest is the band who came best out of that,
Yeah.
It's not Judas Priest. It's his own little thing, but at least they didn't kind of pussy out on the whole thing. They just, okay.
Yeah. I still feel like, listening to Firepower when they put that out a couple years ago now, I was like, this album rips. It has the modern production and everything, but it sounds good.
That's what destroys me with that album. It's like the songs are actually really cool and it's Judas Priest, but it's got that, if you skip through it on your CD player, it's going to sound like you're starting the same song 10 times over,
Yeah. The saving grace on that album is honestly just Rob Halford's vocal performance. He sounds like a maniac, dude. A total maniac. Like the fucking Crypt Keeper.
It's like, I was so funny. I just had to mention this. I was watching this whole Sebastian Bach, Rob Halford thing that was going on online here the other day. Did you see that?
No.
There was, I don't remember the channel. It's one of the metal channel things I have on my YouTube, and It was three metal people, but a couple of them were comedians as well, and they had Sebastian on. And Sebastian is Sebastian, he's all over the place, and they're talking about metal and stuff for about an hour. And then they start talking about Rob Halford, and of course, Sebastian and Rob is friends. And then one of the someone of them says like, yeah, does it, warm up his voice or anything? And then one of those comedian dudes managed to say to Sebastian that, yeah, he probably gargles, semen. And it's really weird to see. You see Sebastian just sitting there for a couple of minutes while it's dawning on him what this guy said about one of his best friends. And then he just goes off. He's so fucking pissed, and you see this comedian metal guy just trying to retweet his tracks there. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. And Sebastian is like, dude, that's my fucking friend. You don't fucking say that about my friend. Going on like that. And then he actually turns off the camera, but he forgets to kind of log off. So for 5 minutes, you can hear Sebastian going around in his room. While the three podcasters is just sitting there staring, just like, what the fuck's happening here? And they're like, Sebastian?
Yeah. Man.
It's the weirdest thing I've seen ever. And then I saw straight after that, Rob Halford, of course, he's just commented on the whole thing. And like, he just looked at them, and because they told about the whole thing and Sebastian's reaction, and then they asked Rob on camera, like, what do you think about this whole thing? And Rob just went a little silent, and he looked at them and he said, no, I'm a swallower. That's the only thing he said.
Oh, fantastic.
He kind of just grabbed three of them by the balls there like a 65-year-old grown up, a whole gay man, fuck you.
Yeah.
Fucking views and things,
Yeah. Way to have, like, the most unapologetically masculine response to that.
I think it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit what people do with their sex life. I do not care at all. And seeing him like, doing that thing, just kicking away the soapbox and just like, we're going to put it on this level. I think it's beautiful. So that's kind of that shows me that like actually both Sebastian and Rob is still like, they got their roots fixed where they're supposed to be still. And that's really nice to see.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably pretty cool, seeing some of the people that maybe like you looked up to, or that were like, just doing it when you were getting started, seeing some of those people like still fucking out there, still doing it, and still having those people to be like, holy shit, you're still fucking here? Then I could be here.
Yeah, because I didn't ever think that 20 years ago. I was like, oh, I'll be dead by the time I'm 50 or something like that. I never expected it. And you can even see even Danzig is out there, with his triple neck and, doing his thing. And I think it's cool. It's very inspiring. And no matter how old and ugly we get, imagine this bunch of people when people are starting to reach, Johnny Cash kind of age. Mm-hmm. It's going to be wonderful to look at this shit.
Yeah, I think the convenient thing, most of us have always been kind of ugly, so all we got to do is get old.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about heavy metal and that whole scene is that, ugly guys get beautiful girls.
Yeah, the age kind of I think the age does us some favors too. There's kind of like an aesthetic to it.
It's for hip hop and for heavy metal, it's the same thing. I think it's like if you're a little older, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's okay. Look at Lemmy. He was pulling 25-year-old chicks and stuff like that, and people can say whatever they want about that, but he wasn't complaining all the way to the bank.
Absolutely not.
No.
Nah. So with everything that has been going on, thankfully we didn't touch up on any of this, like how has COVID been treating you? I mean, you live in the middle of the woods, so you probably don't give a fucking shit anyways.
Nope.
You're not in America and like, surrounded by a big city and all this shit. You're in fucking Norway. So I imagine it's a completely different situation.
I'm in the middle of the woods. Outside my house, it looks exactly like the drape I got behind me. So I got wolves, I got bears, I got, 5 inches of snow now and frost, and there's no one around. There's no fucking COVID. There's nothing. If you put a mask on in my local store, people just look at it and you can almost hear them going for the gun. You know, so. And in the whole of Norway, we had 320 deaths. It's nothing. So people are just fucking around.
Yeah. But
I use it as an inspiration, to be honest. And it might be a little harsh and, tough angled to say, but we deserve it as humans. We deserve a fucking smack, so it's okay. And I think it's good that everyone is kind of like, you have to kind of reset your brain a little because things got so serious. So I use it as an inspiration instead. Everyone, a lot of people is getting paid to be home, make an album, write a book, do something that you've been thinking about for 20 years instead of just like complaining like half the planet is doing now.
Yeah, I think that there's just some people that unfortunately didn't have anything to look forward to, no reason to have time alone. And I can't believe, I never thought about that until now. I think that, people always talk about, oh, you should have something to live for. And I get it. But I kind of have this mentality of I like the idea of just having I can live for how do I word this? I don't have anything that I have to do. I can just chill out and I have these projects and little small things and, it's not an obligation. I'm wording this terribly. My brain's going, ugh. But
yeah,
I think that just finding, with everything that happened, it's been really interesting to see how some people have nothing else better to do now, but complain about having nothing to do, where prior, all they were doing was complaining about never having nothing to do. So it's what
or not enough time to do the things they wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this 10,000 fucking times. Whenever anybody asks me how to do something, I just say, you just gotta actually want to give a shit. You gotta have the will. That's all you need.
Yeah.
You don't need
do whatever you want.
You don't need the fanciest guitar. You don't need the fanciest fucking computer. You don't need anything. You just need to have that drive, and everything else will figure itself out.
Yeah, it does. That goes for everything, in life in general. People just stopped and thought a little bit about stuff, but it's back to internet and social medias and just these brainwashing tools. I enjoy watching old VHS tapes just for the fuck of it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just it's inspiring. I still have some of my old compilation VHS tapes from the 80s, and I put them on every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's important to go back and revisit those things that inspired you to become who you are today, and really analyze what you were trying to do. Because I think sometimes you could get lost.
Completely, and it's natural. It's okay. I don't blame a lot of big bands, for example, for just kind of getting lost in a modern sound or overproduced kind of stuff and money and whatever. But it's natural. It's what's in us humans, But I wish a little bit more could come to the conclusion of I need to go back in time. For example, Johnny Cash did. He went back in time 5 minutes before he died. He said, okay, I'm going to record 4 albums or 5 albums or what the fuck it was, just with stuff he was inspired by.
Yeah.
And he picked really cool songs and stuff like that. But he went back in time, and had a talk with himself. And I think, imagine all those bands, the cool big bands, Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, Sodom, Iron Maiden, also all of those bands. Imagine them just, like I said earlier, going back a little bit with some crappy equipment and a couple of weeks alone with some beers and just cranking out some songs,
Yeah, I think
that would be some remarkably good albums if someone can get those people back into that state of mind. And Bruce Dickinson's got his own jumbo jet. How can you keep your feet on the ground anymore? Mm-hmm. Literally.
Yeah, I think that it's, for me, I had been thinking a lot about when was my happiest time being a creative person. And like, what was I doing in that time? And it was like before the Facebooks and all this other shit was going on. And I was just making music for me and my friends and, you know, playing shows to friends and family and shit. And it's like, it wasn't this huge thing, but I was happy, genuinely fucking happy. So I need to just like over the, you know, with the exception of the podcast, because this is a very social platform for me. So outside of this,
that's different. That's one of the actually good things are the podcasts and some of those things. I like downloading Ancient Aliens like in the middle of the night and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like anyone else.
You know, I just try to go back to staying offline and just try to focus on working on projects and just, you know, working every day on a new thing. Like, you know, just whatever it is. I'm doing way too much. But as long as I get like one cool thing done a day and I didn't like, you know, freak out.
I do that all the time. Like the last couple of days, I've been like sending out layouts and my masters and stuff for cassette releases, you know. It sounds completely weird. Like, but it's like there's some cassette releases in Chile and in Malaysia and in Italy, you know. Well, okay. I think it's fun. You know, it's only going to be printed in like 100 copies, and there's one in Spain too. It's been printed in, you know, 100 copies of one of my solo albums. But I think it's fun. It makes me feel good, but I've been working a couple hours on that, and I'm setting that off. And I know I'm going to get a cool tape back in the post in some months. I think that's fun. I do it only for myself. I don't do it for anyone. It's just for my own enjoyment. And I've always done it with all the music. Like I said in the start and stuff, everything about black metal was only about us and doing it for yourself. Even the church burnings were, you know, an internal thing. It might sound like people were doing it to kind of really rebel against the government, the Christian government, stuff like that. I think it was even much more internal thing that you just want to prove to all the other guys that I'm the crazy motherfucker in this town. And then it just went like really nuts, the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine, you know, it's no different than, you know, my buddy here that used to like to throw bricks through the laundromat window. No good reason. He was just being a turd, just being a little shit. And then, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, there's obviously no sort of a statement to it, but I imagine with like the church burning, there's like, oh, it's real easy to attach a pretty serious statement to this. And there are people that feel very passionate about sort of things. And like,
the reaction is
take it and run.
It's so good. It's so instant. It exploded way more than any of us thought.
Yeah.
It was really like an instant reaction, you know. I'm sure those guys who burn churches, you wake up the morning after and look in the paper and there's like, you got the front page of every newspaper. It's exciting. And you know that your friends, your closest ones, they will know that you've been doing this. And your status in the whole scene and that kind of thing. That's what Euronymous brought in with Mayhem, you know, this classification military style of, and of course Varg also brought in that kind of thing, you know, where you have to push those boundaries. And I'm all for pushing boundaries, and I pushed them very far and very wrong, very many times.
Yeah, I think that,
and I've been to jail too, and I've done all the things, and I tried to murder a guy, and things went completely fucking bonkers.
Jesus Christ.
I never did one of those things to do anything against society. It was just like, I'm possessed. I'm fucking possessed. That's what I felt when I did those things. It's just completely brainless, zombified. Just like, I love the feeling. The feeling of everything was so cool. It fucks up a young person, you know,
I think
if you take it too seriously, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about, you know, all of this stuff happening at the time when as a human, you're like, you know, absorbing everything like a fucking sponge and you're developing so much, you're changing. Maybe you're like 16, 17, 18 and like life is changing on all these angles and you feel immortal. Like you just feel like you're fucking immortal in that time frame.
You're growing. Like if I met myself when I was 18, 19 years old, I'd probably beat up myself because, you know, I had wings the size of giants. You know, it feels good. It feels really good. It feels like your black belt martial arts in, you know, black metal. It
Yeah.
feels really good. And on the stage, and everything was growing and bubbling, and you had the media, and everything was just like, of course, it does something with a really young mind, and every one of us had a young mind. So it colored so much of my soul, to say,
Hmm.
that I can't kind of get out of that kind of thing. It's still a part of me that is just as big part of me as the heavy metal side of me, which is the stuff I grew up with since I was very little. That's like one side of me. That's why I have two names, for example, because I can't I'm kind of a little schizo on that stuff. I have so much heavy metal, and then there's this really, really black side that just want to run into the forest here and scream and shout.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, I have to do both of this. And I'm hyper creative too. I can't stop making music, so I'll keep making stuff, and it's ending up in all kinds of different projects. And it's I don't know, it feels like a possession that took place when we were younger in all of us,
Yeah.
of the whole scene. And I think you can still hear that there is a difference. And I'm not saying this to brag my flag, but there is a difference in the sound of Norwegian bands contra all the other bands when
Sure.
it comes to black metal, and it's still there. And I don't know why. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the feeling we have, or it's the thing we're born with, or something. But even just the difference between Sweden and Norway is big when it comes to black metal. They are very good at what they're doing, but it doesn't smell of woods and snow and that kind of stuff in
Sure.
the same sense.
Sure. There's a different nuance. I imagine, like a black metal band from Texas is going to sound maybe just as silly as a Norwegian Pantera. So
Sometimes, yeah.
it's like,
sometimes I see bands and it's like this is, and some of them. I know some really cool black metal bands from Texas, like the Black More and stuff like that.
yeah,
They're pretty good, but they have adapted and they're doing a black metal desert thing, But sometimes I have bands like I had this band from Texas who contacted me, and they were doing the full corpse paint, spikes, Gorgoroth thing, and they were all in black Bermuda shorts. It's like, fuck, this is weird. This surfer skater thing that you're mixing in here.
yeah.
And they were contacting me. It's like, hey, we want to play in Oslo. And I said, you don't actually want to play in Oslo. I can guarantee you, you do not want to play in Oslo. There's going to be no one there apart from the sound engineer.
Uh-huh.
Because the standard is just like, it's way up. And I see a lot of bands coming to Norway thinking that, we're going to be part of this black metal thing. And it's not to be cruel or mean or anything, but Norwegians are a little cold when it comes to that black metal thing. So a lot of those bands go back home with a tail between their legs, and it wasn't the best of experiences because none of the Norwegians were going like, yeah, black metal from Ghana in Africa. No, that's not going to happen. Yeah.
I can imagine that, I think maybe it's not even something that's necessarily tied to music in general, but maybe something with Norwegian culture is where you probably value authenticity a lot more than, we'll say, an American. And I think that as a heavy metal musician, it's really easy to get caught up in like the proficiency and the knowledge of like an instrument. And I'm not saying that, people that are like in black metal aren't proficient, but that's not what it's all about. I think there's a nuance in authenticity and like being genuine to what you're doing and what you're contributing to the craft of heavy metal or black metal that somebody in Norway is probably going to appreciate more than how fast you can shred or how good your drummer is or how good your face paint looks and all that shit. I think a lot of that stuff doesn't matter. It's just like, who the fuck are you? You're coming here.
Exactly. It's about the feeling that you can put forth,
Yeah, it's like
people keep forgetting that it's all about the feeling. That's why we have genres, because when you look at a genre, you expect a certain feeling, and you look at an album cover, and you look at the band and the song titles, and you expect even a more feeling. Like, that's why the first Cannibal Corpse is really cool, because you get the full package again. You know?
I imagine being a band from outside of Norway and going there, like a black metal band, and going there to play shows would be like, going to a restaurant and bringing the waiter food.
It is actually, or going to the Sunset Strip from Norway and being a glam rock band from
Yeah.
Norway and say we're going to the Sunset Strip. No one's gonna wink an eye or you just even register that you're there.
Uh-huh.
That's what it said. People have to realize, who am I? What kind of band do I want to be? What's my field? Do a little research, figure this shit out, because if you're gonna do something and you're just trying too hard and it's not really you, but you like corpse paint, but you're a little scared when you go to a Gargoyle show and you actually want to go home. maybe it's not your thing. Maybe you should do some technical death metal instead, or there's nothing bad about that. But I see a lot of people call them posers. I don't really care that much for that name, but I see a lot of people who try really hard.
Well, I think I think that comes from like the environment that you're maybe brought up in, and like the people that you have, like maybe like your one really, really good friend is into black metal. You kind of like the American stuff, but you want to hang out with Todd. So now all of a sudden you have a Dark Throne back patch on your jacket so you can hang out with Todd and hang out with Todd's friends.
Yeah, and suddenly you're playing in a black metal band with Todd, and you're puking blood on stage, and you want to go home and listen to Korn, and you can't do that because Todd would, make fun of you.
Yeah.
The girl in front of you, she's like been like transfixed into Cradle of Filth, so you want to go a little vampire there. So you're kind of like looking at yourself, and you're 17 years old, and you're a gangly little skeleton thing, and she loves Peter Steele from Typo Negative, and it's just all crushing you.
Yeah. So what do you do to get away from all of the distractions? You and your friends decide, hey, let's go light a church on fire. Fuck it.
Yep. Let's make our own fucking club here.
Yeah, exactly.
This is our black circle. And it worked a couple of instances. It worked, yes.
Yeah. Fuck, man. Well, dude, I could probably keep talking to you for like another hour, but I actually have to get to band practice. I'm probably going to be late, which is funny, but it's all right.
Yeah, but it's a very decent thing to go to. So
yes. And also we've been chatting for an hour and a half at this point. So anybody that's still even watching at this point, thank you for sitting through all of this. If it took you a couple visits, you have to stop it and come back. I appreciate your diligence. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. But I think some of my people will actually be hanging out and watching this, and they really actually like to do that. I did some podcasts here earlier, and a lot of people actually bothered to watch like 2 hours or something. So it's dedicated people.
I mean, it's a good time to be doing things like this for sure. If you're going to be at home or isolating from people, at least take the time to, and interact with art that you like, interact with, podcasts and listen to people, have some conversation, stimulate your thoughts, and hopefully, people got something out of this. I feel like we talked about a lot of cool shit. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, I think it was cool. I love your little channel going there, man. I just wanted to help out and have a little talk. I'm sitting in the woods and I was having a beer and I was watching your show, and you were talking to Blaine from Banger, and I was like, I got really into it. I was like, I'm just gonna send this guy a mail.
Yeah, I appreciate it, dude. I really do, because like that. Honestly, I mean, this because you're old school. The only way this shit grows is from communication and collaboration.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I did see it. Yeah, that's awesome. So I appreciate you taking time.
It's very true, and I like to talk to like real people, and some people just stand out to me like real people. That's why I like your stuff, and I watch Banger TV and those kind of guys because they come from a real place. It's really nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, with all that being said,
it's better than linear TV and all that shit. I rather just pick my little things and enjoy if I'm gonna watch something.
Yeah,
or listen to something.
That's like the fun thing about YouTube, is that you just kind of have like a DIY TV sort of thing, and you can find like the most obscure wild shit.
It's really nice. Suddenly I just, I want to go into this topic, and you just, down the rabbit hole, and there you go. Mm-hmm. There's a million other people who's just as fucked in the head as you are.
Well, my friend, I guess that's probably going to be about it.
Awesome.
From America to Norway Look at this is crazy. We're talking in real time right now through screens.
Yeah,
Fucking
I think it's
wild.
Cool. It's like, you know, when we were young and watching Blade Runner and stuff, like we're not quite there, but we're heading there a little bit.
Yeah, you are my first international guest, so thank you for that. Oh wait, no, Blaine's in Canada. That doesn't count. We're same continent.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't count. He lives.
That's like putting on a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. I could drive to Toronto in like 6 hours.
Actually,
probably.
you're so far north as well. You know, you can spit into Canada.
Yeah,
so that doesn't count.
Yeah, it doesn't count at all. So you're the first international guest. Thank you for being here. And hey, have a good day, but it's probably like 11 o'clock there now. So have a good night. Almost midnight,
you
right?
Too, have a great rehearsal, man, and say hi to your people in the band and the people you hang out with.
We'll do.
You're an awesome dude, man.
We're going into the studio this weekend. We're going to record 4 songs in 2 days.
Oh, very cool. That's what I said. You know, do it fast, do it quick, do it with full passion. Have a couple of beers and just go for it.
Yeah.
And if you need any help, I can master your stuff. If you need some mastering.
Hey, you know, whenever we get the stuff back, I'll shoot it over to you. See if it's authentic or if it's a pile of shit. You could tell me, and I won't feel bad. We're learning.
I listen to all kinds of music, you know. So I got an open ear for everything. So and I got a good studio here. I can do masters for you and stuff like that. And if you need anything, just let me know. You're a really outstanding guy.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And with all that being said, I guess I'm just going to end this phone call and then I'll put an outro in. So take care of yourself and enjoy the woods. Be safe out there. Don't get eaten by a bear or anything. The world would be a worse place without you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, dude. Have a good night.
Don't get eaten by the big town.
Yeah, I won't get eaten by COVID. That's pretty much the only thing I have to worry about.
That's true.
All right. See you, dude. Have a good day.
Okay, have a good day, man.
Peace out.